Hi, my name's Emma and I work for Future You. This session is all about our creative writing programme, Future Writers. The Future Writers project is designed to encourage young people in Lancashire to share their individual ideas, thoughts and imaginings. Our last competition, the Lockdown Diaries, was a great success and we received a huge variety of entries. The top 10 pieces were made into an anthology and the winning students were really proud to see their work published in the collection. Our latest theme is Outside the Window, and we want you to enter your work and be in with a chance of featuring in our next anthology. I will give you all the details on how to enter a bit later, but first I'm going to tell you more about why reading literature and creative writing are so important. Some of you might recognise this image from Joe Biden's inauguration as President of the United States. These events usually have a reading from a famous poet, but this year Amanda Gorman made history by becoming the youngest ever poet to be given the honour at just 22. Although she's made quite a name for herself now, she started out as a complete novice just like everyone else. She first got interested in poems because she suffered from a speech impediment and used pieces of writing that she liked to practice talking out loud. As she got older, she began writing things herself, and by entering creative writing competitions and attending open mic events, she began to get her work heard. She then got jobs writing speeches, tributes, and children's books before becoming National Youth Poet Laureate in 2017. Fast forward to 2021, and she's performing her own poems to millions of people on a global stage. It just shows the best way for you to achieve something is to simply begin the journey. Literature can mean lots of different things, from novels to poems to plays. It can even involve things outside of books, like speeches, song lyrics, or blogs. So when we talk about reading and writing, it doesn't just have to be stories. One of the most significant things we get from reading or hearing different pieces of literature is that we learn to appreciate words and their power. They have the ability to make you laugh or cry, change your opinion, or motivate you into action. Reading certain texts allows you to travel to other realms and times, all from the comfort of our own homes. This can be particularly powerful at the moment when we are very restricted in where we could go. From reading other people's stories, we understand more about our own culture and other people's, gaining an insight into different people's experiences and circumstances. We therefore learn to consider multiple perspectives and points of view. Stories are very rarely black and white. They often challenge us to see things from different sides and make our own decision about who we sympathise with. Perhaps most importantly, reading develops our individuality, creativity, and sense of self. We get to choose what characters we like best, what stories we find most engaging, and what style of writing makes us want to turn over page after page. As well as this, it's also important for all sorts of different school and college subjects. Even science and maths involve understanding the phrasing of questions and being able to communicate an answer, both of which are rooted in reading and writing. Creative writing competitions, like Future Writers, are designed to challenge you to try and come up with something new. This in turn can provide you with a real sense of achievement and what you managed to produce. And if all that isn't enough to encourage you to take part, there is also a prize for the top 3 pieces of writing. The values and skills gained through reading and studying literature can help you in a number of different ways, both now and to help you increase your future job prospects. As I just mentioned, reading regularly helps you increase your ability to process information, which is important for all of the subjects you study. It's also important in the workplace, as almost all professions rely on problem solving and communication, both of which come from reading and thinking or talking about what we have read. Reading text from a variety of different perspectives also encourages us to draw links between local and global issues, so what affects us and what impacts on others, meaning that we are more likely to work well collaboratively or in a diverse team. These are all skills we might not even realise we are developing, but they are absolutely essential in the 21st century, as increasingly more jobs become outmoded by the development of artificial intelligence. Machines might be able to put parts together quicker than human hands, but they cannot do the kind of deep critical thinking that we do when we read. So the skills we learn by doing it are what sets us apart. As well as working for Future You, I am also a lecturer in the English and History department of Edge Hill University, so I teach students studying towards their degrees. The reason I'm qualified to do this is because I studied English literature at university for over 9 years and achieved 3 different degrees. The most recent one of these was a PhD, which is the highest qualification you can study for, and having achieved this is why I am now a doctor. So I thought I would give you a bit of an insight into what it's like to study English at degree level. What you might not expect is that studying English at university is actually not that different to studying it in school or college, but on a much bigger scale and in more detail. The process of reading, thinking and analysing doesn't really change. You just have to become a more intelligent reader. Compared to what you were asked to read in school or college, you will also be given a lot more choice about what you study, and it will involve a greater variety of different texts. For everything you read, you will be asked to consider these key things: themes, context, characters, language, form and technique, and theory. Some of these might seem familiar, and others you may never have heard of. So let's have a look at each of them in a bit more detail. The theme of a text is a central idea or ideas that a writer explores through it. They are not just what a book is about, but more the issues it's trying to address or the genre it fits within. For example, the Harry Potter books are focused on magic and wizards, but the themes of the story are things like confronting fears, death, love, fate, and acceptance or tolerance. Once you have identified the themes of a text, you can start to think about why the author has chosen to address that theme, what quotations or moments from the text demonstrate that theme, and how effective the text is at making their specific point. The context of a text is the background information or circumstances that help explain why something is happening within the story. For example, the attitudes and experiences of characters in a book written in 1606 would be very different from one written in 2021 because it's a very different context. The kind of things you would consider to establish the context of a text are when a text was written and what society was like at that time, the age and nationality of the author, as well as their life experiences and what or who influenced them, what other texts were being written or published at the time and how they might compare or contrast, the moral or political landscape of the time and whether the subject matter of the text might have been acceptable or scandalous to its audience. Once you know all of this information, it can help you understand the author's choices of theme, character and language, as well as how you as a reader should interpret them. There can be lots of characters in a text, but you would usually focus on those at the centre of the action or storyline. The characters of a story can be identified into categories, the main two being the protagonist, which is the main character or characters, the one that moves the story forward. And then we have the antagonist. They're the primary opponent of the protagonist. They stand in the way of the story moving forward and the main character achieving their goal. A famous example of this protagonist-antagonist relationship is Batman and the Joker. It's important to consider what type of characters feature within the text and what role they have in telling the story. as it impacts on the perspective that you get as a reader and how you relate to the experiences being described. The significance of language is all about the power of the words the author has chosen. The words, phrases, or sayings an author uses can have a dramatic impact on our perception of what they are saying. This is because all language has two types of meaning. The denotation, which is the literal and specific meaning of a word, and the connotation, which is the idea suggested by or associated with a word. So words might have different meanings for different readers. For example, let's think about the word blue. The denotation or dictionary definition of blue might refer to the pigment, or say it's an equal mixture of both red and green light. But the connotations of blue might be the sky when it's sunny, the feeling of sadness, or even the Future You logo. It's more about what we think of when we hear the word. Writers often play around with this concept and deliberately use words which evoke certain connotations in order to reinforce their point and add dramatic effect. The concepts of form and technique include lots of different things about the way a text is written and will change based on the type of text or the genre of writing. For example, when analysing a poem, you might go through and highlight things like the images shown here. Some things you might look for and consider the impact of are pathetic fallacy. This is when the natural world or some part of it is treated as though it has human emotions. You might also identify motifs, which are recurring ideas, objects, characters, or concepts that have a symbolic significance in the narrative, often creating a certain theme or atmosphere. There are lots of different literary techniques that you can find even within a short poem. Thinking about why an author might have chosen certain ones helps us understand the effect they were trying to produce through their writing. The final thing you would consider when looking at a text is theory. A theory is an idea someone has had about something that has an impact on how others think about the world. When examining literature, you would primarily use literary theory. There are hundreds of different literary theories, but here are a few common examples. Postcolonialism. This looks at the representation of different races or cultures. Gender studies. This looks at the treatment and representation of men and women. Marxism. This emphasises themes of class conflict. Cultural studies, which considers the role of literature in everyday life. And finally, eco-criticism, which explores cultural connections and human relationships to the natural world. Some theories are more suited to certain types of text, but whichever theory you choose to use, the idea is that it would help inform and challenge your understanding of the work. So you might be wondering how all of this information about reading is meant to help you produce a piece of creative writing. But actually, lots of top authors say reading is the best way to be a better writer. This is because it introduces you to new words and language that you might never have heard in everyday life. It prompts your imagination, allowing you to think about things outside of your own experience. It makes you think about how things are portrayed, how you view things, and why point of view is so important. You can find out what you do and don't like, and you can write in the style that you enjoy. You can be inspired and get ideas. Most stories borrow themes or plot lines from other texts. Sometimes this is on purpose to give a new perspective on what happened. Other times it's as simple as there being a big challenge that the main character has to overcome, something which happens all the time in many different ways. To help get you started, I've also put together some top tips for creative writing. Firstly, write what you know and what you don't know. It's much easier to use settings, characters, background and language that you're already familiar with. However, that doesn't mean you can't create new stories from the world that you already know. Use your imagination to create new situations or characters, or write something you know well from a new perspective or set in a different time or place. Make sure you keep your readers guessing. When people are reading, whether it be a short story or a poem, they are more likely to be engaged and interested if you keep them in suspense or challenge their perspective. So don't make it obvious what's going to happen. Don't be too predictable. Make life difficult for your characters, include some obstacles in their journey, or offer an alternative opinion to the one you are arguing for. The key is to get your readers thinking and keep them on their toes. Use all of your senses. The best way to engage readers is to make your writing feel realistic, even if you're writing about an imagined alien aircraft. A great way of doing this is to give them an insight into not just what the characters can see, but what they can smell, taste, hear, and how things feel to touch. Not all your descriptions have to include this much detail, but remember that we use all of our senses all of the time in everyday life, so it's worth exploring the information that they give us. Include these small details. The most powerful pieces of creative writing go beyond simply explaining what happened and explore the details of a situation or a character. We all have lots of different things going on in our lives and our heads all at once. We can enjoy one experience whilst also worrying about something else, or be distracted by noticing something random that has nothing to do with what we should really be paying attention to. To make the characters in your writing more realistic, it's really interesting to try and include some of these strange little details. What have they got in their mind that's making them get more annoyed than they would normally? What are they watching out of the window when their dad is trying to talk to them? What does the thing they are eating or drinking bring back memories of? And finally, don't be afraid. If you worry too much about what your work will be like when it's finished, or whether every idea you come up with is good enough, it will hold you back. The best thing about being a creative writer is creating things. Not all of your ideas will be perfect, but you can always change stuff and add or take away details afterwards. Your background and perspective, what you bring to the act of writing, is just as valid and interesting as what anyone else can bring. So don't let fear hold you back. As promised, here are all the details about how you can enter our Future Writers competition. What we want you to do is produce a piece of writing that is related to the theme outside the window. It can either be a written piece uploaded as a Word document, or it can be spoken word, presented as an audio or video clip. It doesn't have to be about something real. It can come from your imagination or be inspired by something you have seen or heard. Be creative. It must be no more than 500 words or 3 minutes long, depending on how you choose to present it. Once finished, it needs to be submitted via our website, where you can also find the full terms and conditions of entry. The deadline for submissions is Friday the 30th of April, so you've got plenty of time to come up with something brilliant. Writing is a great way to express yourself and make your voice heard, and you never know, this competition could be a way of starting your creative writing career. If you want more information on anything I've talked about, then please visit our website or follow us on social media. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with.